Continuing on with our tracking series. We're going to get into basic tracking techniques and also some visible tracking indicators, both observable and non-observable. So a couple things here real quick. I'll write some stuff on the board for you guys here in a second, but this you definitely need to know this because it'll definitely affect your tracking capabilities. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this off to you. Trackers need light to follow Spore effectively and rapidly. Daylight is the best time. However, moonlight, ambient light, or artificial light sources can be just as good as bright sunlight under certain conditions. Regardless, most visual tracking will be conducted during the day. If the ground covered contains ground spore, available light must be used to maximize and manipulate the manner so the tracker achieves optimum performance. Alright, now I'm gonna read off, how it affects it, the light that is. The golden rule of tracking ground spore is to place the tracks between yourself and any light source that it is, whether you're using, flashlights or you have the sun out or the moon, whatever the case may be. In this way, the imprint of the footwear pattern is visible to the tracker as a light and dark pattern of shadows. This effect is more noticeable during the early morning and late afternoon hours when the shadow is maximized by the low sun angles. As the sun rises in the sky, the shadows become more and more difficult to see, and as the sun reaches its zenith, the light shines directly into the footprint, washing out the shadows. This constantly changing light-shadow pattern is known as the time shadow effect, and the tracker should maximize his use of this phenomenon. So the ideal times for tracking is obviously early morning at first light till about 1 hour before, mid-afternoon. So an hour before midday till an hour after is the worst time to be tracking if you have, good ground spore to be following. And then, later on in the afternoon until the sun goes down, again, is just as good for tracking because of the shadows. Let's see, night tracking. You can use infrared, LEDs, incandescent light, light stick, green, red, blue, and IR lamps. I want to say, I can't remember, so don't quote me on this, but I want to say that the blue light was the better of the colors to see footprints at night. I don't know the reasoning behind that. Red you can still see. The green light pretty much washes it out. And actually a green light is good for tracking blood, but if you're just following footprints for some reason, it kind of washes it out. I think it was the blue light that showed the most detail in the footprints when I went through the course here. So there's a couple techniques for tracking. One is micro tracking, the other is macro. The difference between them, micro, is you're looking for every little detail. You want to follow print by print, so on and so forth. So you're looking for every little detail on that track line. And it's good to start off practicing that so you can see different things and pick them up should you get a partial print, down the road or whatever. So I definitely recommend starting out with the micro tracking. It'll just make you aware of so many more things. But macro tracking is actually the preferred technique. I'll give you some undesirable effects of micro tracking. Obviously it's slow and time consuming if you go in, every single detail. The tracker loses feel for either the country or the terrain they're in. I mean, if you just stood back and kind of looked at likely lines of wherever the quarry may be headed, that'll usually put you on the right track. I mean, it's not always the case, obviously. They can veer off. But by nature, we're lazy. And we'll tend to take the easy route when possible. So by stepping back and looking for those things, you'll be able to get on track a bit better. And that's macro tracking. Loss of visual contact with the rest of the team. If you're micro tracking, you're constantly staring at the ground. Your team could be ahead of you, falling behind. You're paying attention to the ground spore and not so much anything else. So that's a disadvantage, and it results in headaches and eye strain. Obviously, you're concentrating too much. A good thing if you have to do micro tracking to kind of defeat that is make sure your whole team is trained at the tracker position, and everybody can be a good tracker, so you can switch guys out, you know, if they're getting eye strain, headaches, stuff like that, or, you know, they're just not on it, you know, can't find the spore anymore, you might want to switch people out. That's a good technique. Alright, so now we'll go over the 6 observable indicators and 4 non-observable. So, ground spore, again, it just marks an impression of footwear, other body parts or equipment left on ground surfaces, which may include dew on the grass, frost and underwater prints. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen this, but you could step in like a mud puddle, you know, that has water in it. And after you take your foot out, obviously it's real cloudy, and I'm sure you didn't spend the time to stick around and wait. But eventually that cloudiness is going to clear up, and you can actually leave a footprint, you know, below the surface of the water, and you know, stay on spore that way, or pick up a track, whatever the case may be. So just a little FYI on that. Underwater prints. Ground spore consists of any combination of the following 5 characteristics. Regularity is the first one. So a uniform tread pattern is the example they give for that. Flattening is the next one. That's marks left by pressure on the ground from the foot. So you're not always going to be able to follow a footprint. You know, somebody walks across the grass or a hard surface, asphalt, concrete, something like that. You're not always going to get a footprint. You're not going to get flattening, obviously, on concrete or asphalt, but through the grass and stuff like that, you're not going to get a distinct footprint, but you can see, you know, where somebody may have stepped just from the, lost my train of thought here, the disturbance left by the foot stepping on the grass. It'll be unnatural to everything else around it. The next one is transference. Obviously, you walk through that same mud puddle, come out on the other side, and you may have mud or just water on the bottom of your boot, may kick up on a rock. Well, hey, everything else, or leave, or whatever the case may be, but everything else around it is going to be different. You just made transference from that mud puddle to something else on the other side. Color change is the next one, and that's revealed by broken ground surfaces. Again, in my last video, I talked about the rock, and I failed to leave out that even just moving the rock just a little bit, you can see, you know, if you step on a rock and put the pressure down on it, it may have moved just slightly, but now you can see the crack around the outside of that rock where the dirt's not tight to the rock like everyone else around it. So that's something else to look for. And the last one is disturbance. Marred or disturbed ground, out of balance with the surrounding natural state. And I've already touched on that a couple times. So all of that, those 5 things were all included under ground spore, and that's the first of your 6 observable indicators. So the next one is aerial spore, another indicator. Damage and disturbance to vegetation created by the passage of quarry through it. From foot to the height of any gear carried, Aerial spore consists of any or a combination of the following 9 clues. Crushed, broken, or bent grass, leaf creases, so you could have a leaf, like this, and you step on the edge of it and fold it over, and now you've just creased the leaf. Crushed or bruised leaves, plants, and twigs, so you could have a rock, or even just a hard surface, but a rock, a log, or whatever, with a branch hanging out with leaves on it, and if you step on that, you're going to bruise the leaf if you step on it, because you got the hard surface underneath, and it's just going to mash up the leaf. Again, that's going to be out of its natural state to everything else around it. Broken or stripped twigs or leaves, skinned bark or knocks, twisted or dragged vegetation or vines, that's a good one. Your feet get caught up on it. That'll even give you a direction if you have nothing else to go by. You're walking in the grass, it's pretty thick, your foot gets caught in it, it's going to make like a V pattern, which ultimately points in the direction that the quarry was traveling. That's a good one to look for, if you don't have a footprint to follow. Dew knocked off of vegetation in the early morning. Everything else has dew on it, except this path that you just left from walking through there. Turned over leaves showing lighter or darker side, again same scenario as the rock. You start kicking leaves over, there's different temperatures going on, the underneath could be wet, and, you kick it over, so now you left a wet trail and everything else around it's dry, so on and so forth. Vegetation out of balance with the surrounding vegetation. Again, it's just disturbance. So those clues were all under aerial spore. That was the second indicator. I'm going to write these down on the board for you guys. So the first one is ground spore. The second one is aerial spore. Hopefully, let me see if you guys can see that. Looks like you can. Alright, the next one is sign. Sign is any indicator other than ground or aerial spore. Sign consists of any of the following: broken or unbroken cobwebs, displaced leaves or stones, disturbed insect nests, animal or bird alarms or disturbances, water splashes and deposits. So all of them are a form of sign. So that's the next one. I'll write that down for you guys. Alright, the next one is litter. Man-made artifacts. Litter can be either accidentally dropped items or deliberately discarded or hidden articles. So litter, anything that would throw out, a piece of MRE wrapper or whatever, energy bar or something like that, Monster can, Budweiser bottle if you're around my area. Things are all over the place. So litter was the next one. The next one is blood spore. And it's blood dropped or splashed onto the ground as a result of a wound. Shocking. Pretty self-explanatory there. The level of blood smears and the amount of blood will indicate the position and severity of the wound. Blood spore consists of any combination of the following 5 types: venous bleeding, drips, drops, or smears, that's blood coming from the veins. Arterial bleeding, there'll be spurts or splashes. A lung shot, or not that it has to be a shot, but you got a damaged lung that's bleeding, it's usually going to be pink and frothy. A head wound, Usually you'll see some gray matter with blood mixed into that. A gunshot is dark colored blood mixed with bile, and it has a very strong smell to it. So blood spore is our next visual indicator. And our last one is going to be body waste. Any naturally occurring matter which is produced by the human body, any substance which is placed into the mouth, then ejected or vomited out. Body waste consists of any of the following three types: urine, feces, oral ejecta, anything spat from the mouth, i.e. spit, phlegm, blood, sunflower seeds, tobacco. Not only do I smoke, during my army time when I don't have the time to smoke, I'll throw a dip in. So all those things you can look for. So that covers our 6 visual indicators. 2, 3, 4, 5. This one, body waste. I'll write that one down for you. So now we'll get into some unobservable indicators. The following are the types of non-observable indicators or clues sought by the visual tracker: smells and odors, unnatural noises for that specific environment, insects ceasing to chip or buzz, or sudden silences. You throw off, somebody walks through the area, throws off, nature's rhythm, the birds stop chirping, stuff like that. And the fourth one is the sixth sense, or, to make a long story short, that gut feeling that you get. The definition they give: one must never ignore what is called the sixth sense. The sixth sense is merely subtle, unconscious sensory inputs which have not yet been processed by the brain into conscious, recognizable, logical thought. So pretty much your gut feeling. So that's going to cover basic tracking techniques, as well as the 6 visual signals and the 4 unobservable signals. So the next video in the series, we'll talk a bit more about dynamics of a footprint and action indicators.